I do.
And are they pretty hard and fast, would you say?
So if you don't mind me taking it from the top,
Okay.
since we're talking music tonight,
Nice segue there.
I'm good like that. I get up early. The select board entertained a proposal for a bus service for the Adult Social Center. So that has an impact on this warrant in a number of different places.
So that's Article 6, right?
Article 6.
COA bus, yeah.
So, let's see what we did here. Oh, we didn't put the number in. All right, so the number appears in the memo. We have begun using a national blanket contract, which is approved by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for use by municipalities, and the entity is called Sourcewell. And the nice thing about Sourcewell is that they're national contracts, so you're not going to go buy a bus. You're going to hook onto a contract that's going to go out and buy 500 buses, and you benefit from the quantity pricing, from the delivery priority that you get working through a bigger buying group. So we've done a couple of things with Sourcewell already. We've bought a small pickup truck for the building official that was in the budget last year, approved by town meeting. And we've also engaged them with a fuel card program so that we can make sure that all of the taxes that the town is exempt from are removed from what we pay at the pump for a gallon of gas. Because we don't have our own fuel depot. We're going to Family Convenience, we're going to Beck's. So those vendors have signed up with us to be part of the fuel card program. So now when we buy a gallon of diesel or gas, all of the taxes are removed. And that's a WEX. WEX is the clearinghouse for payments, but it's a Sourcewell program. So we called Sourcewell today. They are a big player in the municipal vehicle market. And Patrice and I had a lengthy conversation with the rep about a bus that would meet her required specifications or her preferred specifications for a vehicle.
Is Sourcewell municipal only then, pretty much?
It's mostly municipalities, but some big states, like Minnesota, will buy through them.
I see, okay.
So a lot of times when you hear people buying buses, they'll say, I'm on the Minnesota contract. That tends to be a very popular thing. Long story short, you know, when you put people who might need extra time on a bus, whether because they're in a wheelchair or a walker or whatnot, you need some space inside the bus to move around. So you can get a relatively affordable vehicle that's got one wheelchair position and a couple of seats in it, but that is not what Patrice would spec out for the town. We may have more than one person who needs a ride who's in a wheelchair, and some of these vehicles can be flexible. So the vehicle she has spec'd is a vehicle that has 4 wheelchair positions. Whenever you set up a wheelchair position, you're losing seats. All right, so you fold up the seats and you push them aside and you secure the person in their wheelchair. So this would normally be a 14-passenger bus. It's 14 feet long. You lose about 8 seats when you put all 4 wheelchairs in. So you'd still have room for a couple people to sit, but that's where you'd end up. The tough thing about these buses is that all of the economic disturbance that we've been through over the past couple of years, and some of the chip, you know, the dashboards for these Ford vehicles with all the chips, computer chips in them, have gotten harder to get and more expensive. So a bus that would have cost about $75,000 2 years ago is presently selling for $115,000. So that is the best estimate we have. We will have a written quote by Friday, but we just had this verbal quote today. So that is Article 6. These 2 items here in Article 1, so COA wages and COA expenses, are there to reflect the operating costs of such a bus were we to have it. So we went out and looked at several surrounding communities that operate their bus right now. And those rates that you see on item number 2 in the second numbered list, those are the hourly rates for starting salaries for those employees in those towns. effective January 1st, that Northbridge rate can't stay there because that would be below the minimum wage. The minimum wage will be $15 an hour starting January 1st, 2023. So I don't know that anybody actually makes this rate, but that is where they are on the scale. So the average of the rates is about $16.91, let's call it close to $17. I would put the grade in the comp plan at miscellaneous grade 1, which gives me 10 steps there, which range from 1556 to 1901. And I would like the flexibility, if I were to be appointing someone to those positions, to put them on the scale according to their experience. For budgeting purposes, I would take the highest rate. So 20 hours a week for 12 weeks, the remaining quarter of 2023, because it will take 5 to 6 months to get a bus if town meeting were to approve it. That's 240 hours at 1901, and the budget would be 4563.
Now, would that person be considered a full-time employee and get
No.
benefits?
Regular part-time.
Okay.
So what we would do is split it into two pieces so that we were well below 20.
Okay.
So one person would 12 to 15 hours a week. The other would be per diem. The point of having two is that if one person gets sick, you're still going to run the bus service. So you should have two people on the payroll. The per diem would step up and fill, and vice versa.
The bus is to transport people from the senior center?
So on the next page of the memo
Okay.
is the mileage estimate. Miles don't cost money, fuel does, but we went through what Patrice would anticipate the bus would do. We would drive a fair amount locally here in Douglas. Getting people to the center is the primary purpose of having a bus service, right? Getting people for nutrition, for exercise, for social activity. But then we have some specific needs that the population has already brought up to us. We would probably run to Milford Hospital and its nearby buildings or buildings on campus 3 times a week. It's about a 22-mile trip, round trip, each time. The precise calculation of that is 813.6 miles would be anticipated over those 12 weeks of Q4 of the fiscal year. People would like to go to the grocery store 1 time a week. They would go to the big box retail in Northbridge 1 time a week. I'm not naming the businesses because that's not cool, but between those 2 businesses, that's where a majority of our seniors get their prescriptions filled. So there would be a dual purpose, not just going to shop, it would be to get their pharmaceuticals. So then I just took all of that and said, you just double that to account for your local travel. So you're going to get about 1,992 miles estimated. This bus, pretty well known platform, it's the E350 Ford platform, gets about 12 miles to the gallon. So we'd use about 166 gallons at $4.50, because remember, we don't pay all the taxes. Either a fuel budget of about, let's call it, what, 747 is the math. I'd call it 750 just to be kind of close to. So you can take that 1/4 cost, multiply times 4, and that would be the annualized cost that would go into the budget for fiscal '24 if this were to be approved.
Now, do they pick people up at their homes?
Yes. I think the general rule is you have to be ambulatory to get on the bus. If you're already in a wheelchair, that's a safer thing. But what we're not going to do, because we can't safely do it, is, having difficulty walking, you're better off just getting in the wheelchair and getting into the bus
Right.
than trying to get on with a walker or a cane. Just much safer. But a bus of this size is below the CDL threshold, so we wouldn't be trying to recruit a CDL.
Okay.
In a formal survey, a lot of what we do at our adult social center is personal interaction. But Patrice isn't here to go into it, so I don't feel comfortable speaking for her first-person perspective. I don't know that we can assume that people are getting these services now. I think one of the reasons why it's being talked about is because they are either spacing out their trips to Milford or not going at all because they don't have a ride, or they're getting a ride from a family member causing any number of inconveniences to other people in their lives in order to be able to get there. So the number one request that drives this through the process is there is no public transit solution to get people from Douglas to Milford.
You have both Blackstone and Millville down here.
Just that they have schools together, but they don't necessarily see eye to eye in a lot of things. And they're not necessarily close. If you know where Millville Town Hall and some of the other Millville resources are, they're not necessarily close to Blackstone's. So, but that is true. They each have a bus. The mighty, mighty town of Millville, which doesn't have a lot of things that we have, has a senior bus.
I know when we had this many, many years,
Not advocating yay or nay on any of these proposals that come through the select board for ARPA. My job is just to document as best I can the thought process. But we talk about shared resources at the municipal level for many, many things. And my favorite example is street sweeping, right? What a pain in the neck it is to have a street sweeper in your fleet, because you only use it so many times. They wear out, because if it's a vac unit, it's going to sandblast itself. And then it's really difficult to find somebody who you can either rent from or hire them to come street sweep. It's much higher cost per annual sweeping. But then when you talk to your regional partners and say, hey, we share an animal control officer, we share this, well, the problem is we all need the asset at the same time. So even though it's a pain in the neck to have your own, sharing it's an even bigger pain in the neck because you don't have it when you need it. And I think that's some of what goes on here is that while we're all small towns and we may all have similar needs, land-wise, land mass-wise, the smaller towns are pretty big, and so people are pretty far apart. The bigger towns fill their buses. So Northbridge and Uxbridge run multiple units, and they're busy.
they have multiple buses?
I think Uxbridge has the 2 or 3.
Okay.
Well, the town I'm in is only the size of Uxbridge, and we have 6. We have a very elderly population in Westport, but there's a lot of people that use the service. I agree with you that would probably be between now and town meeting, something that Patrice and others need to document better, which is how many people do you have who think would use this? Since COVID, we've had really solid participation at the social center because we learned a lot of things about how to do things better, because we had to try to manage it without being in person. So there's a pretty decent clientele. The other thing that I find a little bit interesting is I know there are people from these other towns that come to our social center because they like it better. Right, so, you wish you could do regional stuff, but it ends up being a little bit harder than people realize.
Do we have an estimate on those?
As strong as other trucks, right? It's an E350, which it's not the greatest platform in the world, right? So you're looking at, if we take care of it and we're able to put it under cover and regularly maintain it, what did I say for annual miles? It's about 8,000 miles a year. You should get 10, 12 years out of this.
Where are you going to put it on the cover?
Well, I didn't say where, I said if you need me.
Okay, we'll just go in order then, and we'll grab you as we need to then.
In case anybody has questions about 2
All right, anybody else on the Article 1?
Yep.
The biggest surprise. Questions are,
Okay.
go. There's plenty. How long do you want to sit here and talk about this?
Not too long. Is the end in sight here?
Yes, the end is in sight. So the new
Is there a light at
consultant,
the end of the tunnel or not?
there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's about $65,000 away, which is why we're asking town meeting for a little bit extra money to close this out. Long story short, we changed consultants because the other one ran for the hills when we said we were going to do a peer review. He resigned 6 minutes after I sent him the email saying we would do a peer review of his work. The new consultant has just a different approach, has interpreted the data in a much more, frankly, standard way. and is going to try to remove this incident from Tier 1, so we'll get out of the DEP monitoring and just go to closure. We got a couple of small mop-up items that do need to be closed. We got a little bit of soil gas readings underneath the boiler pad that just because they were detected, they have to be addressed. So that's basically where we are. So we're not going to be doing a sub-slab, gas evacuation unit. So if you have radon in your house, I did when I was in Rhode Island, you had a little fan that ran constantly. So we're not doing that, so we're taking like 50 some odd $1,000 out of the closure budget. The groundwater came back with nothing in it. We are just going to redig the wells because they were improperly done outside the building.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were just in a totally wrong location. So those things will be addressed, and that's what the $65,000 is for. If you heard me say it to the select board, I am going to pursue some dialogue with our property and casualty insurer around the performance of their environmental consultant, because this starts off as an insurance claim. So the first $500,000 comes from our insurer. What we've spent above and beyond that $500,000 is what we're asking town meeting to finish funding.
Yeah.
So the claim as a whole is going to push $700,000 total. And, it was all driven by analysis that was a little bit too gung-ho, and this could have been closed out for a lot less money. So,
The insurance company that brings in the,
there you go. It's that preliminary.
He would be out of the circle of trust.
Okay.
Would you like them at your next meeting?
it'd be kind of nice to know what we're spending 200,000 on.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
The end.
Right.
Right, because there could be some borrowing, but the borrowing could be through a 100% loan forgiveness loan.
Yeah.
So this might just be
We
the
front it.
typical, we raise the flag, say, here's your 200,000, they give us the loan, then they forgive the loan. I know that sounds crazy, but that's how some of these programs work.
Do a mass save loan.
I do.
Okay, what is it?
So Article 5, there's a lot of words there, but the select board has granted, as part of the closing on the property over next to McIntyre's pit for the warehouse, a license to allow the driveway construction, to bring in the construction equipment, partial encroachment onto the town's property for sloping. You can't just put the driveway up with a cliff off the side. You're going to grade it out, the trucks can move along, and the weight would be distributed across the graded surface. The driveway itself is on property they own. But the sloping used to support the driveway will encroach on town land. The select board doesn't have the legal authority to grant an easement. That's an interest in real property. That has to be done by town meeting. So the proposal before town meeting is to convert that license into an easement permanently to run with the land.
So they're going to be adding gravel in to make this even. They're not taking gravel out.
Correct.
Okay. Because if they were taking gravel out,
No, we would
get
want
the
money.
money for it.
So there'll be some heavy truck traffic rumbling through for a couple months while the building is built.
Any idea when, if this is all approved?
Huge excavator, really big, huge front-end loader, some other site prep machinery.
So if we
It's
drove by
already
there,
in
you'd
place
see?
and working.
You
You would see clouds of dust.
Okay.
Because you're looking downhill, so you wouldn't see too much from the bottom of the hill, but you'll see the activity from the dust. The critical step is the installation of the bridge over the Mumford, so there's rival technological solutions to that problem, engineering solutions. That's where we really want the traffic to go for construction. We have to build the bridge first. It needs time to sit, cure.
When will
It needs
that
to be done.
happen, you think?
Fall, winter?
Okay. Oh, which
I
year?
believe the people who say they're building the building. I don't listen to the engineers, because at the end of the day, the people who hold the purse strings are the ones who are going to determine the schedule.
Right.
And the last thing I heard out of Frank Bakunis' mouth from CRG is, we want this building open in 10 months. So
So
I'm listening to
that'll
him.
be downstream
He's writing the checks.
from the little bridge, from the little dam there, right? Okay.
Yeah, just downstream a little bit.
All right, anybody else on Article 5? Welcome, Howard.
It carries a lot of traffic, it carries school buses, it's in really tough shape, especially certain sections of it that haven't been paved in a really long time. But we also have a mountain of drainage problems with the road. And we really need to engineer the drainage solutions, so why spend a lot of money repaving a road only to have it chewed up with water and ice, because you didn't engineer the drainage properly. So that is the proposal, is to raise this $45,000 to hire an engineer to do the drainage improvement design, install those drainage improvements, and then do the pavement after that. So we postponed South Street for 1 year in order to be able to do this. There are many culverts that cross the road, and there's a lot of water that comes off, what would that be? The west side of the road.
Okay, any questions or comments?
Evening, members of the FinCom.
Good evening.
The Route 16 sidewalk project started long before I did. This,
You mean before you were born?
2 years removed from college, does that help? So there was a vote at a previous town meeting to at least start exploring this project, and I'm not so keen on the entire history of it, but ultimately, we have had our engineering team look at this section of sidewalk. This is an extension of the sidewalk on Route 16 up the hill, kind of near, was that Franklin Street, Sunset? You guys know the town better than I do. I'm still getting there. So it's about 800-foot section of sidewalk. Now, what this ended up turning into was a massive stormwater project. There are 4 catch basins, 3 manholes, a lot of drainage and curbing that needs to be done, ADA compliance on the sidewalk, et cetera. And this project ballooned in cost substantially than what we would have originally anticipated back in 2008 with the capital plan. But the due diligence is to see the project through, to get the article onto the warrant as it was requested by the residents of the community back then. So this is the estimate that we've come up with, and it's presented before you this evening.
And will this hit everything on the checklist in terms of
Many.
ADA, drainage, et cetera, et cetera?
It is a substantial checklist, and includes, and this is only one estimate with a 30% contingency, because we anticipate that the work wouldn't be done right away. We still have to get multiple quotes, et cetera, so.
So how many feet of sidewalks they're going to give us?
John, say like 700 or 800 feet. Yeah.
Does it end at Franklin Street? Is that one of the ends of it?
Across from the GBI.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. The crosswalk would cross Franklin Street and extend onto the other side for a short duration, a couple hundred feet.
So if the town meeting approves this, how soon would the work start?
I don't have an answer for that.
Portion. I mean, it was many years.
With infrastructure is already under the road, and that was about 7,500, I believe. And we've been working with the residents also that have been lobbying for the sidewalk. We call them into meetings to review the design also, and they're very satisfied with what they see to this point. So most of that, I believe, is around 58,000 will be expended due to the work that they've already done for us with the design.
Okay, anybody else? Comments or questions?
I think it was originally conceived that Mr. Cundiff asked for the money because he viewed it as probably.
There were some changes recommended by the planning board at a public hearing that took place 2 days after FinCom met, and so those changes were brought to the town meeting just slightly late, so they were not, it was postponed again. So what I have done is I have incorporated those 3 changes. I incorporated an additional change per request of some residents, and it was also talked about with the planning board, was to remove some language in here that recently had been overturned in some cases. It was to use what's called a biomap as a guide to restrict development inside what's called core habitat areas, but the biomap was proved to be just informative and not something that towns could use to regulate the use. So that was the fourth thing I removed from the bylaw, given the case law. So happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
So Matt, between last spring,
Kind of tell us what the things were. that-
Yeah, one of them was just a repetitive sentence, I forget which section it was in, but it was at the recommendation of the chairperson of the planning board at the public meeting back in April. It was kind of a repetitive sentence. The other one was to change the table under section 6.8.9.1 for dimensional regulations. They adjusted the frontages, the minimum lot area, and the side and front setbacks. Those originally were 200 feet frontage, and I believe the side and rear setbacks were 100 feet apiece. So they reduced those. And then there was a,
To eliminate that 5 acre.
yes, that's the one I'm trying to find. It was land clearing and, well, it's no longer a section number because it was removed, but ultimately there was a limit on the amount of forestry that you could clear, and the planning board voted to remove the cap for clearing so that solar could develop without restriction. So that was removed.
so Matt, generally speaking,
I think it's difficult to do because solar is under the Dover Amendment. It has a lot of exemptions under zoning. And as projects get challenged throughout the Commonwealth, there's going to be opportunities where some of that language in their draft templates that we're pulling from may change. But what we can do is just, in this case, was kind of keep our ear to the track and follow the cases. I have some colleagues that follow this stuff very well, so I was leaning on them a little bit for what some of the changes were so that we incorporated in it today. So things will change as it goes. Other cases could change language in our bylaws, and at those times, we'll make the changes also. But we continue to watch it, but it's kind of difficult to answer.
are we, with the wording here, are we more or less consistent with our neighboring town?
We're not restricting this to just certain areas of town. You know, we're very welcoming to solar already, just the way our bylaws are. And we're not changing what zones they can be in or not be in. We're just adding language to govern, monitoring, maintenance, reporting, clearing, design standards, lighting, fencing, and just those site plan aspects. And I know it's 13 pages of that, but it's consistent with the template that many towns in the Commonwealth have adopted.
Okay, comments or questions, anybody? Article 3.
Currently exists as a zoning bylaw under section 6.1. Due to some, call it confusion between developers and the town, we uncovered a couple of gray areas in the earth removal bylaw that we needed to modify. And through conversation with the building commissioner and other members of the community, the big thing we wanted to do was increase the cubic yard threshold that triggers the need for an earth removal permit. And currently it sits at 300 cubic yards. Now, anyone who builds a house that has a septic, that has a pool or anything is going to trip that. All right, so what the building commissioner wanted to do was raise that to 1,000 cubic yards. So that was our main goal coming in. It's like we want the earth removal to really affect the larger projects in town, not have an independent homeowner have to come in and do things like this. So
That happened a lot? I mean, under the current bylaw,
it had been happening with a lot of subdivisions.
Okay.
So, but it's consistent, and obviously we have gravel pits that change their operation a lot, so they tend to apply for them more often than others. So when I submitted originally just an amendment to the zoning bylaw under section 6.1, I submitted it to town council, and town council gave us the idea that this would be better served as a general bylaw for a couple of reasons, and one of the
Okay.
reasons that they said was that currently there's if it's a general bylaw, you don't have to worry about grandfathering for fill operations, or in some cases, agricultural exemptions, where I'm sure many of you are familiar with an issue that took place in Uxbridge, where a developer was using large amounts of contaminated fill on a property and ended up in court and much things. So in this case, kind of learning from someone else's mistake. So, so we took their recommendation and instead crafted this into a general bylaw, and we presented it to the Board of Selectmen because the general bylaws administered by them, excuse me. We have them as the permit granting authority. And we gave the selectmen the opportunity to decide, do you want it to be you? Do you want it to remain the planning board? And it's staying under, it's going to be a selectman permit moving forward, per their request. So that's what we have here. A lot of what's transferred into the general bylaw is already here. It's already in the zoning, it's just moving from one place to the next, but we really tuned out the exemptions piece and made sure that it's very clear that it's either 1,000 cubic yards or it's not. There's no exemptions for like septic, this, a certain pool, or if it's incidental construction, we got rid of that. So it's just, you're either 1,000 cubic yards or not. We made it very cut and dry, make it easy for everyone to interpret without any confusion moving forward. Lots. And the way that our regulation is read made it very gray to understand what was incidental to the construction of a house. Now, that could be the foundation, the septic, or whatnot. And in this particular project, it was grading a hill in the backyard. Now, there's nothing in the regulation that read that that's not incidental to construction, or it is not. So that led to some back and forth, and eventually an approval from the planning board, but it delayed a project substantially. Just trying to come to an understanding about that. And ultimately, neither parties really agreed, but a permit was issued. So in order to avoid that moving forward with any other large-scale subdivision projects, that's why we felt we needed to make a change. So we weren't sure what the change was going to be. We just wanted to clean up that.
Town does this, actually
Right.
does a printout of the, and mails it to the houses, but I think it's such a great thing that the mailing
Study in our
estimate there.
books.
That does not
What's
include the
that?
printing cost.
Oh, that doesn't come.
That's the mailing.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody's tracking with me as we look at the budget for the year we're in and the year approaching. So we always start with revenue. The conversation starts with what resources are available to the town for the next coming year. One item that is not on this memo, because it was sort of a late break today, is, I think everyone is aware of the concept of new growth, right? A couple of nods, okay. So we had put into the budget for this year that we're in, $400,000. And as the year went along, it looked like we might be a little short on that. But something has happened in town. The power company's been upgrading its lines for solar fields and putting three-phase power to different parts of town and upgrading both the wires and the poles. That's the so-called 504 account, which is the utility infrastructure. So much of it has been built, and it has quite a high value, that we actually look like we're going to be over $400,000. So the dynamic of this is the principal assessor comes up with his estimate for new growth. It is sent to DLS. There's conversations. Various rules are applied. So that outcome is when your new growth is certified, right, after they approve it. I can only tell you what we've submitted. We've submitted 466,514. So that's a big number for new growth for a town like Douglas. So the total, and I went in my office specifically, we budgeted the levy to increase, so property and personal tax, to go up 441,352. So if we do get certified with this number, and like I say, there could be pushback from DLS, but we have submitted 466,514, which means we have more new growth than the year-over-year change in the levy. Based on what I have in my budget workbook, that did happen in 2020, but it didn't happen for many years before that. So it's a highly unique situation, and I always want to remind people that this cannot and will not continue forever and ever. We are heading into an economic climate where the Fed is adjusting interest rates to calm inflation. Interest rates go up Real estate activity can often slow down. You don't get as many new homes built. You have more permits for remodeling and additions. But if the interest rates get too aggressive, even that will get tamped down. So this is a unique moment in time for a town like Douglas to have 3 or 4 years, and within that 3 or 4 year time frame, to have 2 years where new growth has outstripped the growth of the levy. So it's a luxury, not a routine. And that goes into our planning, both for the next fiscal year and for future fiscal years. Again, our situation will be different because we haven't even begun to receive the new growth or the revenues from the warehouse project. Now, we broke ground on it, so I think we can finally say, yeah, obviously, we want to see trucks driving in and out of there and people operating out of the business. But it's really not a theoretical concept anymore. People are dropping millions of dollars on this thing to get it built. So even if the residential home market does cool off or even go into stasis, Douglas will march ahead because economic development will keep you going through that period of time. It's a big number, but again, we'll bring that number in when it's time. The rest of what I have here, I will get to the first bullet point at the end. What I wanted to do in the second and third bullet points is talk about adjustments we've made to revenue for the year we're in. The final budget that was passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor included a number of increases to various categories of municipal aid. So our budget estimates were conservative. The actuals that came in were higher than our conservative estimates. So there are 5 secondary bullet points here. Chapter 70 went up by $33,420 over our budgeted amount. We budgeted 0 for charter school reimbursement, which was, that was a controversial item and went back and forth in the General Assembly, got zeroed out, but then it came back. So we got $16,407 for charter school reimbursement. Unrestricted general government assistance, that's UGA. We saw an increase over our budgeted amount of $21,655. Here's the one that'll attract the most attention. We had a very conservative estimate for Pilot. Pilot has been more or less stagnant for years, so that's payment in lieu of taxes for state-owned property in the town of Douglas. But we're actually going to get 316,125. So that's an increase of $69,981. That's more than Pilot has increased for many, many years. So we had a small offset. We had school choice out, was budgeted at $347,745. The actual was $347,286. So the change reduces revenue by $2,541. So the net of all of these, provided I didn't fat thumb my calculator, is an increase in the baseline revenues of $138,742. So for a small town, that's not a bad way to come out of the budget season. It would have been very difficult to raise that $138,742, so we're happy for it. The only bad news here, the General Assembly, well, should I pull my punches or not? Well, I'll be nice. The General Assembly and the cannabis industry have arrived at an understanding that mostly sides with the cannabis industry's view, that these impact fees that are being charged by municipalities are too high and shouldn't exist, that we should be forced to document the impact of these things coming into town.
Yeah.
Now, listen, they also have the benefit of 4, 5, 6 years of experience having these things located. And at first, there was this mad headlong rush, especially around retail establishments, and it was a major league pain in the backside for some of these communities that had early retail establishments with the traffic and the people going all over the place. A lot of that has really settled out. And so from my perspective, it would be the better part of my job every week to try to figure out, well, what did we do for such and such a business this week. You know, the sun came up and the moon came up and it rained a couple times. It just doesn't, the things that we're doing for many of these businesses are totally indirect and can't be measured very easily. So the General Assembly basically said, yeah, you can't do that anymore, right? You can't charge this money anymore. So we're going to take it out of the budget, going on a go-forward basis from this fiscal year. We will finish this year, I'm taking it out of the budget doesn't mean I'm not going to try to get some of that money in the door, because it was an agreement that was signed by both the town and the business. They knew it, they could budget for it, and so it only goes so far. And our biggest payer of this impact fee has in fact benefited tremendously from the activity of the town. So we ran public water by their building and connected them to it. We're running sewer by their building, and now we're going to run natural gas, alleviating the need for them to have truckloads of propane come every week. So yeah, you know what? Maybe I can't document penny by penny how much we're helping you, but we just increased the value of your building like ridiculously.
Okay.
So I'm not too afraid to try to collect that. But on a go-forward basis, it'll be zero in the budget. We're just not going to ask for it. What I would remind people is it is not in this line, so it is not an impact fee. You will find it in the excise tax income for the town, but the town meeting in Douglas adopted the local excise on marijuana sales. So we've started getting those checks from the retail outlets in town. If we can complete the land transactions for the forest that are needed to get public drinking water supply well dug and the second cannabis facility opens up, it'll still be a fairly nice chunk of change that comes into the town from the cannabis industry. It's an excise tax that we're piggybacked on the state to get.
You think that'll eventually be found unconstitutional then, except
Booze, you pay an excise tax, you know, and almost anything you do is you pay, cigarettes. So I don't know where they would come off thinking that's unconstitutional.
So Matt, when all of this settles, you think the cannabis,
Centers, I think I'm well within my analytical druthers to say that they are about a $2 million a year business, each one of them. So 3% on the gross sales is about $120,000 a year.
okay.
Between the two, when we get to.
But it's fascinating how it works.
Thank you for coming up with this, Matt, this summary.
So then, the last thing I would talk about is we got a rate pass for our retiree health insurance, so that we have so much stability in this account now. It's nice, because there's the rate pass, but then there's also a rate cap. Because we attracted Fall River to join the group, we now command a large number of covered souls as a group. So the carrier was happy with that result and had provided us with a contractual incentive to do that. So the rate cap extends out to 2025. So our per member per month premium will not exceed a $10 increase each year through 2025. So that's pretty extraordinary. You don't see that in the industry very much. I won't pull any punches here. Our group is the bridgehead for Aetna to sell this Medicare Advantage program into the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Nobody else has adopted it. So they see us as the primary vehicle to grow their market share. So they are providing these incentives to us. But we are currently at $282.72 per member per month. When we were with Tufts, we were at $389. So we're $100 less per member per month.
Matt, who's in the group?
So the group is now 7. So we grew from 3 to 7. It's like naming my kids, right? I want to make sure I don't forget any of them. Douglas, Webster, Dudley Charlton Schools, the town of Medway, town of Abington, the town of Franklin.
Fall River.
No, not Fall River. Oxford.
Oh,
I'm sorry, and Northbridge, so it's 8. We are now 8. We have groups that have joined us for retiree benefits only, Fall River and Stoughton. So we have 10 towns in the retirees and 8 inactives. And a lot of interest in what we're doing.
I would think so.
I'm part of the marketplace. Fallon exited the market. So,
Exited?
yep, they left the health insurance, employer-based health insurance market in Massachusetts.
They're still in Medicare.
They're still on Medicare, yeah.
Medicaid,
Yeah.
but-
So that's just a minor note, but so it's only a few $1,000s, but over time, so Tufts wasn't only at 389, they were kind of locked into a 3% every year, and that's just gone away, so much more steep. That's what I have at the moment in terms of what we're looking at. We'll start doing planning in earnest really in the next couple of weeks. What I'm trying to arrive at is what is the total revenue growth going to be, because I'm going to try to figure out how my compensation reform proposal, how much of that will be taken up by the new revenue. So I want to keep that to be a reasonable number so that we can still do some things that we need to do with the rest of the budget.
So Matt, this is not related to this without killing ourselves with taxes, or can't we?
This is the coin of the realm, right? The answer to this question, because I think we all understand that we have one building that we absolutely have to resolve. The highway department has to be resolved. So one could say that perhaps the town, because of its unique fiscal position under its current circumstances, should make the investment now so that 30 years from now you still have operable buildings. And you would have made the investment at the time when you had the most resources to deal with it. In other words, your down payment would be bigger now than it could be in the future. But another way to look at it is, build what you need, be reasonable about it, look to future needs, and at the same time, don't overstretch, because you don't have that kind of debt capacity to be able to do that. When I look at statistics for municipalities across the Commonwealth, we have a very high debt ratio in Douglas. A lot of it goes back to, building a couple of school buildings. So that constrains your activity, and what you need to do is build 4 corner buildings that are functional and downright aesthetic in terms of their, this is no frill stuff, right?
That's
It says
aesthetic, not aesthetic.
Aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, Town of Douglas on the outside, and make sure that it's a safe and comfortable place and efficient to light and to heat. But it doesn't need to be a 12-corner building with all kinds of gable ends and a cupola on top, like the police station that was just built in my town. And $9.3 million for a police building for a town. And if we built that building today, it would probably be more like 12 or 15, because the costs of things have gone up so much. That's not, I wouldn't recommend to the town of Douglas that you do that. But having said that, the responsible thing to do is to go to the design professionals of the world, not people who want to sell you their services to build a specific kind of building, because no matter what you do with the analysis, they're going to drive it towards that. Find somebody that you can trust, that you want to work with, that will weigh your options for you and get you the most cost-effective solution. I think you'll have to borrow. It's a question of how much. And can you keep the lid on it? Can there's some combination of accrued free cash or other solutions, lessen the pain to you? That's one thing. The second piece of it is, if we go out to bond, I think our rating will actually improve, because we have addressed a number of the underlying financial conditions necessary for at least a 1-step increase or improvement in our bond rating. I don't think we meet the grade for AAA, but I think we can go from AA3 to AA2. Actually, I think we were there the last time, so when we refunded the high school bond, I think the town met the scorecard requirements for AA2. We just hadn't shown it over time, so we didn't have a long enough track record of fiscal stability at that level, but we do now. But will those savings, how many basis points will that save us versus what the market's going to do for the cost of borrowing? Yeah, our municipalities borrow at a low rate anyway. Some of the changes during the Trump administration kind of changed the dynamic of the bond market, so it has yet to be seen how well we'll do with it, but
So as we start working on the budget,
it's an hour out of your time, but it might be the best use of your time, rather than having to go take the tour yourself. Because you can see how we have absolutely crammed, jammed, and stacked everything into this little tiny building. We have people working in there who can't move and can't really breathe clean air, because that's why we put the trailer outside.
Yeah.
The air inside is not fit for a human workplace. It's not. Get people sick, which is way more expensive than dealing with the building issue. So time is, the prudent thing to do would be to move things along. But it does take time. Public building projects take a long time.
all right, any questions for Matt?